thank you very much. It's great to be back in Boone County, and I'm really touched at how many people remember I was here about a year ago speaking about election reform. A lot's happened since I was here. I think most of it good. I want to give you an update from the Capitol. At the outset, I want to say, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. Some of it merited. It's a hard time for our community, hard time for our country. We've seen violence, we've seen disasters, but I'm very optimistic right now for our state. I think it's never been really a better time. Reasons why. I've got two main jobs and responsibilities under the statutes of Kentucky. Obviously, under the Constitution, I've got certain core responsibilities in terms of record keeping. I'm literally the Secretary of the state. Every act of the governor, every act of the legislature, we record all those things. Of course, you can go to sos.ky.gov to see these things. But I also have responsibilities that the legislature has given me or my predecessors over time in two key categories, business and elections. First, I want to give you an update about our business situation here in Kentucky, and the news is very good. When I took office in January of 2020, we had about 230,000 businesses operating in Kentucky. Today, we have about 330,000 businesses operating in Kentucky. That's a 100,000 increase. That's about a 45% increase. But to be clear, it's not because of anything that I have done. I'm not here to claim credit for that. But we have some things going for us. First, location, location, location. Increasingly, Kentucky is taking advantage of our great location within the U.S. Kentucky is within a day's drive of 65% of the U.S. population. We have logistics in our favor. We are number 2 in the country in terms of cargo air shipping. Obviously, thanks to CVG and the Louisville airport as well, we've really taken advantage of that recently. But also our legislature deserves a lot of credit. Senator Schickel and his colleagues have cut income taxes 3 times in 5 years. And increasingly, it's not just businesses coming from out of state and out of the United States to Kentucky. It's also more homegrown businesses taking advantage of this business climate that they have created. Of those 330,000 businesses, 60,000 are what we call foreign businesses, which is to say businesses, not literally foreign necessarily, but out-of-state businesses. Ford Motor Company is a foreign company for our purposes. And so we're certainly delighted to see all these big jobs announcements in our state. We're ecstatic about that. But the truth is, where these jobs are coming from, with our unemployment rate going down, the jobs are coming from you all. The jobs are coming from our homegrown entrepreneurs. As I said, when I took office, we had about 230,000 businesses operating in Kentucky. We saw a big spike during COVID in the number of formations of new businesses. Candidly, I was not optimistic. I thought that people, as they were laid off from work as COVID hit, they were forced to stay at home, that they said, well, I gotta eat, so I'm gonna start a business. And I thought that was a flash in the pan, and over time, those businesses would disappear. Either they'd fail, because a lot of businesses do, or people would get their jobs back at some point when COVID passed, and then they closed the business. I was wrong. I was dead wrong about that. Kentuckians are seeing a flourishing of entrepreneurship. And in many cases, as they were laid off, they set up that business that they always wanted to try. And those businesses stuck around. So when we see this 100,000 increase in just 3 years, that means that these businesses have staying power. That's why we're seeing these 20% year-over-year increases that have led to what we're seeing today. On the election front, the news is good as well. When I was here last time, I was talking about the House Bill 574 legislation that had passed in bipartisan fashion through the legislature. We took what we thought were some things that worked well in 2020 when we had to make some adjustments to make sure we could vote safely in the pandemic. We have kept those items. We've expanded on those items. I'll walk you through a few of the things that we have done since I was here last time to go ahead and build on those successes. I think the key to that bill and the thing that I'm the proudest of in that bill is making voting easier. I think voting needs to be secure, obviously, but it also needs to be accessible to people. If you go back to Kentucky's first 2 state constitutions in the 1700s, 1800s, we actually had 4-day voting periods as a matter of right in the Constitution. We're a rural state. It's not easy for people to get to the polls sometimes. So make sure that they could. We had 4-day voting periods. It wasn't just us, other states did too. The founding fathers, when they ran for president, Washington, Adams, all these guys, we had weeks actually to vote. So we've gone back to the future. I don't believe in these election month things. I think that's a bit too much to put on our clerks. But I do think that 4-day window is important. So I'm going to use this opportunity to plug the election coming up. On May 16th, we have primary elections for statewide executive branch offices. That's Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Commissioner of Agriculture, Treasurer, Auditor, all on the ballot. I'm going to deviate just a bit from my remarks and talk about the election for just a moment, because the first question I always get asked is, what's the turnout going to be? I don't know. It depends on you all. It depends on whether you go vote or not. This is an area of the state, I don't have to tell you, historically, turnout's very low. And when you have low turnout, that means that you have a distortion of the outcomes, because certain people are just going to go vote no matter what, and then other people are more complacent. And that means that the views of the people who are very adamant are over-reflected at the expense of those who maybe are more complacent. And that begins to distort, ultimately, potentially, policy. So it's very important that you go vote. I'm sure you're all voters. I want to encourage you to tell other people to go vote as well. Again, it's never been easier in Kentucky history than it is right now. The 4 ways to vote, I'll quickly summarize those. They're on your flyers there on your table. You can vote by absentee ballot if you qualify. Probably none of you do, but if you're a shut-in, if you've got health reasons that you can't vote in person, or if you're traveling, you can vote by an absentee ballot. That's a right that's been in our state constitution since 1945. That's not something that I invented. We've had absentee voting for 3/4 of a century. We've made it easier, but we've also made it stricter. We've required a photo ID to vote in Kentucky during my term, not just in person, but also for absentee voters. If you're going to vote by absentee ballot, go to govote.ky.gov. That's the Swiss Army knife of Kentucky elections. It's got everything on there. That's where you can register to vote. It's where you can check your registration information, make sure it's accurate, find out also where you go vote, what your options are in terms of locations. We also have the absentee ballot request portal there. If you're going to vote by absentee ballot, you can request your ballot there. You can also track it electronically from the comfort of your home and your smartphone. You can see if your request has been processed, see if your ballot has been sent to you, and also see if it's been received back and is your vote being cast or not. All good things you have a right to know. The portal closes on May 2nd at midnight, at 11:59 p.m. That's tomorrow. So tomorrow at midnight, that's the deadline if you want to vote that way. And if you do want to vote that way, you can mail that back to your county clerk, or you can bring your ballot to the drop box and drop it there. The next way to vote is in person, absentee. If you qualify to vote absentee, you're traveling on election day or what have you, but you want to vote in person, like most voters do, you can do that. And the locations are on that flyer as well. That's something that we passed in 2022. 6 more days to vote, essentially. We've got 10 days to vote in Kentucky now. 6 days if you have an excuse. And then 3 days of early voting. That's May 11th, 12th, and 13th. I want to strongly promote the early voting for this reason. I don't want it to be repealed. Kentucky has done something that other states have not done recently. Kentucky is the only state, at least the only red state, the only southern state that's made voting easier in the last few years. You've seen other red or southern states actually make it harder to vote and dial back access for their voters. We've gone in the opposite direction. We've made a point to, again, tighten security, but also to make voting easier for our legitimate legal voters. I strongly encourage you to take advantage of this. And number one, because I want to see it stay. Here's another reason. The lines are shorter. If you go vote early, you're going to be right in and out. Versus if you wait to the last day, everyone else also waits to the last minute, and you have procrastination, and then the lines are longer. We've got a unique challenge here in Northern Kentucky in Kenton County. We've had, unfortunately, some battles with the Biden administration. They have come in, they have threatened the county clerk and the county board of elections with litigation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I certainly believe in treating fairly those who have a disability. We have a legal obligation to do that and a moral obligation to do that. The problem is that the administration believes that the way that you ensure ADA compliance is by closing the polls that don't meet ADA accessibility requirements. Well, again, I certainly believe in access, but I don't think that closing the polls helps access. The administration is not helping us open other polls. They're not giving us funding to do that or otherwise being useful. They're just telling us you got to close these various polls. It's unique to Kenton County. That's the only county that they've come after so far, but they may come after others. I don't have to tell you, it's been really frustrating to deal with the national administration. They spent 2 years trying to pass a federal law to undo our voter ID bill that we passed, to undo the things that we've done administratively in terms of getting the voter rolls cleaned up, taking 300,000 plus active voters off the rolls. They've been a bit of a foil for us. We'll do our best to get along with them as best we can, but it is a challenge that we have. Notwithstanding, we are continuing to pass legislation with bipartisan support. And that's something else that's unique about Kentucky that you're not seeing really anywhere else in America. In the blue states, you've got one party passing what they want the elections to look like over the objections of the other side. And in red states that aren't us, you see the same thing. And when you have election legislation passed in a partisan way, I think that's bad for two reasons. One is that you don't bring everyone to the table and listen to everyone's ideas and treat them fair and maybe get some ideas you hadn't thought about before. But the other reason is it's a terrible look. It's a terrible look when one party tries to tell the other party, you can't vote the way you want to vote, and we're going to limit your access, or we're going to make security lax. We've done it differently under my administration. We've been uniquely bipartisan. We brought everyone to the table. We've listened. We don't always agree, but we try to get along. And that shows in every single year of my term, each of those 4, we've had at least one major bipartisan election bill pass with support from both sides, sometimes several bills. I'm real proud of that because, for example, we had a day in February that we purged 127,436 voters off the rolls in one day. We spent years preparing for this purge, and we pulled it off. And I thought I was going to have protests. I thought I'd have all kinds of controversy. Nothing. Because the Democrats trust the Republican Secretary of State, and the Republicans trust the Republican Secretary of State. And it's not seen as a partisan issue to just follow the law and clean up the rolls. And that's something you don't see anywhere else in America right now, is widespread public confidence in our system and in our office holders. Some other things that we've done on the election front, we've transitioned to paper ballots. When I was running for office in 2019, I drove 50,000 miles around the Commonwealth. I think I made it to 107 counties by election day. And I heard one thing everywhere I went. I heard it from Democrats, I heard it from independents, I heard it from libertarians, I heard it from everybody. They wanted to vote on paper ballots. They trusted paper, they didn't trust electronics. There is some need for some electronics. Otherwise, we would have what we had back in the 1930s, which was weeks and weeks to count all the votes and a lot of fraud, because it's easy to manipulate ballots that aren't scored by some sort of objective tabulator, right? Like a lever machine or a ballot scanner. What we use in Kentucky is the technology that we had when I was in high school 30 years ago, and we had the multiple choice test, and you filled in the Scantron sheet with A, B, or C, or D, or E, and you run it through the optical scanner. That's it. It's real simple. It's nothing fancy, but it works. And it gives us the speed of a very quick count. So Kentucky's the first state in America where we go to bed election night knowing who won and lost everything. 98, 99% of the votes tabulated by the time people go to sleep. The campaigns get to know if they won or lost. The election officials get to know the results. We're one of the only states in America that actually does that. Other states take weeks. Can you imagine waiting weeks to find out who won or lost the elections? What if you're running? It would be horrible. It's bad for everybody. It's a bad look for democracy to have that sort of delay. So Kentucky remains the first state in America to put our points on the board and see how people voted. But we also get the security of a paper trail. Something that we've implemented is post-election audits that really hadn't been adequately done in the past. You can't do an audit without a paper trail. And so that's been also part of what we've implemented, again, to bipartisan acclaim. I want to talk just at the end here about something else that we did. Again, I'm on the business front, I'm on the elections front, but we became aware of another issue where we thought we could be useful. 10 years ago, my predecessor of the other party, I certainly have had my disagreements with her, but she did something that I agree with. She passed a law called the Address Confidentiality Program, the ACP. The ACP basically made it possible for victims of domestic violence to, if they got a protective order, to shield their address on the voter rolls. Of course, your address on the voter rolls is public record, right? For certain people, that wasn't safe. What we saw, though, was because of how that law was written, how tightly it was drafted, it wasn't very helpful. We only have about 50 people, or fewer than 50 people, that qualify under that law for this protection. So we went to the legislature, and Senate Bill 79 passed unanimously, was signed by the governor. We're now implementing that. Here's what it does. It takes that beginning of a program, which is a great idea, but it expands it in a few ways. One is we no longer require now a protective order. To get a protective order, you got to go hire an attorney, and you got to also know who it is that's stalking you. Sometimes people don't know who is stalking them. Sometimes people are stalked by an unknown person. You can't sue that person and get an order if you don't know who it is. There's also the cost, of course, and expense and the delay. And so what we did is we got rid of that. Now our law just says that you apply to our office. We are training our staff to be able to spot signs of abuse or violence or threat. We're going to have everyone certified who runs this program, and they're going to receive sworn affidavits from individuals, and that'll be our basis for making these decisions as to who qualifies. Something else is we're joining 38 other states that have already done this, who beat us to the punch, and we're enacting a reciprocity where sometimes people who are victims, they move to another state, unfortunately. They feel they have to. We want to make sure that if someone is coming here from New York or California or Tennessee or leaving here and going to the other state, that we work with those other states and make sure this is reciprocal. And lastly, and maybe most important, the prior law only said your address was going to be confidential on the voter rolls. If you've got someone now in the ACP, their address listed for purposes of voting is my office, Suite 152 in the state capitol. They don't actually vote there, of course, but that's their address just as a you got to have something in the form, right? So that's the address on the rolls. We are now taking this beyond just the voter rolls to all public records, all state records, all county records. We're going to be working with local agencies, with the Bashir administration to make sure that every agency, state or local in Kentucky, where a voter's information is publicly posted, that we also cover that as well. It doesn't do any good to have one address in one place covered and then it's open everywhere else. I certainly believe in transparency, but I also believe in a right of personal privacy. And just because you put yourself out there as a voter or a taxpayer or anything else doesn't mean that the world has a right to know where you live and you to be potentially harassed if you've got a record of someone doing this to you. So this isn't really part of our typical mission, but it's something that I thought was really important, and I put some political capital behind, and fortunately got it done. One last point, and then I'll take some questions if you like. I don't have to tell you, right now we're in a crisis of confidence in our country and in our state. And we've got a lot of social phenomena out there that are producing this. It's a tough time. Everyone feels exhausted and drained and a little angry sometimes. I don't have any magic solutions to that. I'm just the election guy. I'm a technocrat. But I'll tell you this. I think that groups like this, you all are the glue that holds our society together. We see the country and our state, our communities becoming increasingly polarized and a rising paranoia out there where people just think the government's all up to something all the time. And it's a stretch. And unfortunately, there's a lot less trust. We're entering into a low trust era. People don't know and trust their neighbors. They're not joining local institutions. They're not joining churches. They're not joining the Rotary. They're not joining the Kiwanis. And as we get more distant from each other and we segregate more, we're losing something. We're losing the ability to sit down and have some meatloaf and just talk about our community and talk about our kids and talk about stuff going on. There's no party label. We're just Kentuckians. We're just together. That's getting harder and harder and harder. And again, I don't have a solution for that. I'm just one guy. But I can tell you that you are part of the solution. And thank you for doing what you do. This is really important. It's not just important for you and for Boone County. It's important for America to have people come together with no politics and just sit down and have lunch and just talk. We're losing that, and we've got to make sure that we don't lose it any further. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for having me back again. I'll take any questions or comments you have. Thanks so much.
Questions for the Secretary?
I know I have at least one. Do I have any members who have a question?
I have a thank you.
Oh, yes, sir.
As a part of the Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame, your office has been extremely cordial to us by displaying every year the people who are inducted to that hall. H.B. Deatherage, who runs that, is a member of this club, as am I.
Oh, I didn't realize he was. Oh, that's great.
Very much support helping the Kentucky Veterans Hall of Fame.
Oh, thank you. I'm showing bring my tea real fast. Just to quickly comment on that, we actually, thank you. We have at our, if come see us in the Capitol, if you walk into our reception room for our suite, there's a bunch of plaques all along the wall, members of the Veterans Hall of Fame. And so every year we join them for their parachute jump and some other events. And so really glad to have that partnership. Yeah.
Peter, you had a question?
Yeah, you mentioned the website earlier. I lived in the same house for 26 years, but they moved my voting spot 2 or not 3 times. Would that Swiss Army knife website tell me where it is?
It sure does. So if you go to sos.ky.gov, actually, let me give you a more direct link, govote.ky.gov. That's where you register. That's where you check your information. That's where you can volunteer to be a poll worker. That's where you request your absentee ballot. Basically, everything is right there. There has been a lot of flux in voting locations, of course, over the years. Sometimes because of what I referred to a moment ago. Sometimes because, as I said, it's culturally right now we're in a bit of a decline and people aren't volunteering the way they used to. That's been a big issue for us, is trying to find new poll workers. As our seniors increasingly retire from working the polls, it's getting harder and harder to find younger people to volunteer and take their place. And so, is everyone? I assume you're all registered to vote. Any voter in Kentucky can be a poll worker. We got the law changed to make it easier for any Kentucky that wants to do that to be a poll worker. But yes, at govote.ky.gov is where you can check that out. And Kentuckians now have more than one option in most of our counties. Some still use the old precinct model. Some are a mix of precincts and vote centers. Some are all vote centers. But one thing that we did is to make it easier to have multiple locations to pick from, so you can pick the place that's best for you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You.
Yes.
Just a quick answer to his question. My wife just finished her poll training at noon, and I have my poll training on Wednesday. And we decided as citizens and as Rotarians, we were going to become part of the solution to the extent that we can. So I would encourage anyone here, it's probably too late for this election, but maybe not.
I checked with Justin.
But I appreciate you. I will reiterate, anybody, we need poll workers desperately all the time. So tell your friends, relatives, anybody, please be a poll worker.
Yeah, we'll be back in November, so.
Yes.
Yeah, please do. I'm excited.
Julie and then Ms. Nolan. Julie.
Okay.
Just quick, what's the age limit for someone to be a poll worker?
The only requirement now is that you be a registered voter. And so that means that you're either, oh, absolutely. Not only 18-year-olds, but if you're 17 and you're going to be 18 by the general election.
Which is what my daughter was.
Yeah. Then even at 17, you can work the polls. I would just tell you, personally, I was a poll worker when I was a teenager. It changed my life forever. It got me exposed to the election process, and I fell in love with it.
Ms. Nolan,
Mhm.
question?
Hi,
Hi.
thanks for having us for being here.
You bet.
I run a Kentucky election integrity team here in Campbell County, and I just have some I have 2 questions actually. In our county, we have found that our percentage of voters is 109% more than what's registered in our county. I want to know how that happens, and then are you looking at removing us from the ERIC system, or are we stuck in that because of the judicial watch consent control?
So I don't accept the premise that there are 109% of people in Campbell County that are registered to vote in Campbell County. If you have evidence, please submit to my office. Please do that. Yeah. So your second question was about ERIC. Do folks know what that is?
No.
Doesn't hurt my feelings if you don't. It's kind of technical. So ERIC is the electronic registered information center. This allows us, it's an interstate compact that was set up from states of both parties, secretaries of state of both parties about a decade and a half ago, as a way to cross-check our voter rolls. One of the ways that we've been able to achieve compliance with federal law, Kentucky was sued in 2017. The Secretary of State at the time was sued in 2017, because unfortunately for the entirety of her term of office, 2 terms of office, she didn't clean up the rolls. She didn't follow the law. The law requires us to do that, to engage in regular maintenance to make sure that the rolls are clean. And she just didn't do it. And she got sued and lost. Judicial Watch, which is a right-leaning nonprofit organization, sued her, beat her in court, in a federal court in Frankfurt, and got a judgment from the court that required her to take steps. One of those steps was to join ERIC so that the states could cross-check their registration information. Just real quickly, there's 2 ways basically that we clean up the rolls. One way that we do that is we act on information immediately that we're able to act on immediately. When someone passes away in Kentucky who was on the rolls and we find out about it, we check in a couple of times with vital statistics each week to get a fresh list of the deceased. We cross-check against the voter rolls and we take those people off like that. Same thing with from the administrative office of the courts, we get lists of felony convictions. We get lists of people judgmentally incompetent. They come off immediately. Those are the people that we can take off immediately and pretty easily. But there's other people too. What about people that registered to vote in our state and moved to some other state? Well, I don't have a way to get that information unless I work with some other state. And one thing that we've done is we've entered a partnership with Governor DeSantis in Florida. He and his Secretary of State, I work closely with them because disproportionately it's Florida where Kentuckians retire to and ultimately they pass away there. We had 1 month, we just took off 10,000 dead voters in 1 month. And it wasn't Kentuckians that were still here. It was people out of state, primarily Florida. So we have to work with other states to get information. ERIC is something that was created for us to do that. There is a conspiracy theory out there that it's run by George Soros or whatever, a demonic figure. It's not true. It's not funded by him. It's not run by him. It's actually run by us. It's funded by us. Kentucky pays about $20,000 in dues every year for us to be a member because we benefit from it. It does not add voters to the rolls. It only gives us data from other states, and we trade that so that we can identify people who don't qualify to be on the rolls, and we can take them off. And that's why we've been able to take 100,000 a year on average off the rolls.
Thank you, Secretary. Will you stick around and
Yeah.
answer a few more questions? We got a firm rule.
You bet.
Hey, Michael.
Ring the bell. Ring the bell. You bet. Thank you all. Thanks so much. Thank you.